changing versus just like waiting for Grok to output something makes me not want to use Grok, even though um, it's a lot spicier. It's a lot less filter. It's a lot more interesting. I think I got to the point where I was having a pretty deep conversation about how Nigel Farage campaigning for a ban on haggis would impact the prospects of Scottish independence, right?
Hi, and welcome to another episode of Deep Learning with PolyAI, the only podcast where finally, both host and guest are sharing a continent. I'm welcoming Nicola back to the podcast. Nicola, how are you?
I'm doing great. I think we were on the same continent last week as well. But yeah,
Um, I am excited to talk to you today because one, I want to find out how the West Coast is treating you. You're in the Bay Area now, right?
yeah,
Yeah. You're going to be there for a little while?
all what's in there.
Yeah, excellent. Good to hear. Opening up our office out there, which is great. San Francisco
Yeah,
office,
yeah, no
PolyAI.
problem. I'm in right now. Could have gone better back.
It's okay. It's all right. It focuses all the
Great,
attention.
great office. We've got like 3 execs who are in daily, so it's you always need those few kind of like seed the daily arrivals so that others who might show up know that they're not going to go to an empty office. So
Right.
it's already got great morale.
You need those anchor personae. So
Yep.
I'm glad to see that you're going to be one of them at least for the next few weeks. That's fantastic. But speaking of other like new developments and stuff that's going on in modern times, I wanted to chat with you. It's been a while since we've done sort of a news and review. And
Mhm.
there's a lot that's happening in the general AI industry, of course, with some of the big names, but then also things like regulation and US policy. I'm excited to talk about one in particular that I know is near and dear to us. So I thought maybe if you didn't mind, we take the next 15-20 minutes and just chat through some of the headlines. How's that sound?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it.
All right, let's go. First and probably foremost is announcement of two fairly significant model developments from our foundational providers in Anthropic and OpenAI. Claude 3.7 Sonnet came out, I think, just a few days ago, maybe until late last week. GPT 4.5 Orion it comes out just moments before, it seems, at least according to the announcements and the teasers, GPT-5 gets announced. So, of course, everyone in the industry is sort of comparing the two models. There was a lot of hullabaloo coming out when Sonnet 3.7 arrived, described as more empathetic, more human-like, whereas GPT 4.5 Orion described as a little bit more deeper thinking. Which approach, if we're going to start to compartmentalize and sort of take a focus area, if there's a fork in the road finally with these foundational model providers, which approach is going to win out in the consumer market, do you think?
What I mean, like it's always hard to call anything. I think 3.7 Sonnet is a reasoning model, right? Whereas 4.5 is not. So I think that's
Fair.
already kind of like apples to oranges comparison. But they're definitely always fighting for kind of like the news headlines and kind of like releasing just before the other. It feels like they're in a cold war, so it's always fun to watch. Um, I think like getting to reasoning models, they can output things a bit more quickly, right? I mean, I don't know if you've used Grok as well. I've been kind of like trying to diversify into using all three. And the UX, for example, there where you kind of wait and you don't see anything, there's a very stark difference between that and OpenAI. And really, like just seeing the reasoning steps and the summaries
Hmm.
changing versus just like waiting for Grok to output something makes me not want to use Grok, even though um, it's a lot spicier. It's a lot less filter. It's a lot more interesting. I think I got to the point where I was having a pretty deep conversation about how Nigel Farage campaigning for a ban on haggis would impact the prospects of Scottish independence, right? And Grok was like having was a pretty good chat.
Some salient nuggets on on the haggis divide.
And it was hilarious.
Okay.
Uh, and it pushed back on like I don't think it's likely to happen, but then it would be quite a funny provocation, wouldn't it? And it was like it was a lot less filtered and guarded, but just the user experience of like not seeing it, thinking and summaries, and it's just something they haven't worked on yet, right? Because I think they're just very focused on getting the model to perform, uh, versus the whole kind of like consumer angle. Like I think the consumer angle matters, right? So I think they're like OpenAI, they have the head start, and Satya was recently in a podcast where we talked about it. And yeah, I think it's going to be hard for them to not, well, to be disrupted by the other ones, right? Meta is introducing their own apps. So I think they're kind of like throwing their
Yeah.
that in for, just like an application view of it. Right? And you can't really underestimate it because you already spend way more than a few minutes a day in one of their applications, if not several.
Do you think that meta timeline was expedited because of the DeepSeek drop?
I think so. I think so. But I think it's also something they just should do. I
Okay.
mean, like when we spoke, right? I think that Meta is the Western, you know, like leader in open source, and they should continue to be. That's one angle of attack. The other is just like, what are you doing with consumer? Do you have consumer form factor?
Right.
And like, it's kind of a winner takes all market. They know that better than others, and ChatGPT is the one for now. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know, right? Um, I'm not privy to any information. But my favorite thing about reasoning versus not, I mean,
Yeah.
I think that reasoning as it stands, if you can get it to be very quick, like the best user experience will be the model deciding whether it needs to reason dynamically and kind of like, offering up maybe a quick response and going upon further thought. How about this, right? Could change the answer. There's maybe a good way to visualize it, but like you shouldn't have to like go into the back end and choose which model you're going to use.
No.
Like, that's not a good like user experience.
Do you think when it comes to reasoning models, something that maybe makes them more compelling on a consumer basis, but could damn them in the long run is this possibility of being over transparent in the reasoning? Wasn't that a pretty big criticism when reasoning models started coming out, that it was telling you too many steps in what it was doing as opposed to just delivering an answer or a response to the prompt?
I think models can be fine tuned. I mean, like it's also a design decision. I think
Sure.
the initial bit around like tokens, even though it was charging for at least in API usage, it was charging for the invisible tokens. I think there was an argument around not revealing it because it might contain like potentially sensitive or offensive stuff or God knows
Okay.
what. Um, I don't buy that, but it's like, yeah, like in the end, at the end of the day, like I think it's just a matter of like UX. You should be able to see the trace if you want, but you probably don't want to see it. You just
Yeah.
want the like as soon as you can get it.
So great from a consumer perspective. The Groks of the world's a little bit spicier, a little bit more fun to use. What about on the enterprise adoption framework? Is that going to play against the applicability or the sense that something like Grok is a model that actually has enterprise application, because it right now it seems like a toy, like a fun jerky friend?
I don't know. What do you think?
I'm just going off the fact that you're sort of like typifying your Grok experience by saying it was, a little bit spicier, a little bit more maybe flamboyant.
I liked it. I don't think that. I think that for every enterprise use case, you're going to want to filter and adapt the behavior. Um, if you're like cutting vegetables, and I give you a blunt knife, right? Because I'm afraid for
Right.
maybe I'm not confident that you're good at using a knife, right? Like you're actually more likely to hurt yourself with a blunt knife. So equally, if it's already been like sanitized and made safer and, controls built in, I don't know. Do you use like lane assist in your car or, you know, that whole weird
It's
thing
on
where
by default. My wife turns it off in her car because it annoys and frustrates her. I don't ever bump into any issues with it, but I also don't drive as much. So
just that, especially if you're renting a car, right? And you're not
yeah,
used and you want to change lanes. And you kind of like go softly, you forgot to indicate. You should indicate, but you forgot, right?
yeah.
Um, you're getting to the point where you're like, oh, look, it's turning you back. You get confused. Like it takes,
Starts pushing against you, seems a little bit more counterintuitive with
yeah.
regards to being an assistive device.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So I think like this is similar, right? If you don't know it's going to happen, you might actually do something off, or you might not get the full power of the thing because it's, like it's stopping some behavior, then you're adding extra measures. In enterprise, you're going to do it regardless.
Yeah.
So I am not a particular of the overtune that was done um, for OpenAI, right? And like if you think about the direction they've chosen to take, which is probably the right one for them, which is like kind of like have the application, your money dominantly on consumer. Like each company in the end develops a DNA that then dominates its behavior for years, decades to come. If they're taking the consumer angle, like they will need that safety and they will inevitably continue to put effort into it, right? Um, so the enterprise edition is likely to be less. Enterprise is a wonder, right? It's many things.
Yeah.
So some people will need a thing that's sharp knife or a car without lane assist. And those people that are going to do their own tuning and build their own kind of like applications on top will probably want something that's interfere with less, right? So Grok, I tend to like what they've done there, but I mean, it depends. Like for consumer, you want to do it OpenAI did probably for fast consumer, but we'll see. Maybe the other thing pays off.
We will see. And speaking of OpenAI, a little bit of specialization in some recent announced market moves. Information is reporting that OpenAI is starting to price out the potential for specialized AI agents, skilled anywhere from intro sales reps to PhD researchers, with prices that are commensurate to sort of their human FTE counterparts. We're talking $2,000 entry level per month, up to $20,000 for that PhD level researcher per month. That's $240K a year. Is this indicating that Sam and company are taking sort of a hardline stance that AI alone is greater than humans plus AI, which I think is the general consensus?
Mhm. I think they're saying that that kind of AI, probably in tandem with humans, is worth a lot of money, which will be true for a bunch of things. When exactly and to what extent we shall see. Um,
When you're pricing though,
as
as
someone,
at an FTE rate, like, isn't it sort of you're going to have to pick or choose for a vast majority of organizations?
well, Damien, given what we do, I consider myself a bit of a specialist in pricing, right? When I tell you, what I, what I would tell you, it's very hard to get people to pay like the same amount that they would pay a human. It's possible. I mean, we're the most expensive of all of our competitors, right?
Right.
At the end of the day, people are like, yeah, I should be better and I'd like to get like a 3x ROI, right? Over humanly. The good news is we can get bugs with AI for a lot of tasks these days, right? So that 20,000 a month, who knows? I think it's wishful. It's the same way that, like Agent Force, which only finally announced, a second update, and we're still struggling to find anyone actually using it, other than all the people who, are on like New York subway and the London Underground and the ads
Right.
talking, using it. But they came out with that whole like $2 per resolution. And I don't know anyone who's paid that or anything remote for it. So outcome-based pricing for AI makes sense if you really know what you're solving and what it's worth to someone, and then you can kind of like justify the price. Coming out with list pricing ahead of actually defining a use case is nonsensical. Right? Yeah. Now, yeah, if you've got a super intelligence that can do the work of any PhD level great specialist for anything, which they don't have yet, still. Yeah, I mean, it might be worth that. It might be worth more.
Sure.
I think they're just waxing lyrical, being excited about the future. We'll see. I don't know the numbers. If anyone does, like the kind of like the 200 a month subscriber range and what they're doing. I'm a churned customer of that, and I got very excited about Operator. But honestly, it's too slow. And if it gets faster, I'll pay that. I'll pay more. But until it does, I don't think so, right?
Interesting. Well, they seem to think it's their next significant moneymaker, so we'll see. And speaking of significant moneymakers, AWS recently announces, or Amazon Web Services recently announces, they're opening up an agentic division, agentic AI, taking it beyond the RPAs. They announced Alexa Plus, which obviously imbues Alexa with more generative functionality. They're saying that this agentic wing, it's going to drive the next multi-billion-dollar market segment for them. Was it bound to happen, or is it something where maybe Amazon's doing a little trend jacking and it's a marketing play?
I'm sure it's both. When you look at, I mean, like Agentic is just a headliner for we're going to commit ourselves to doing a lot of work with generative AI and realizing value from it, right?
Right.
We're an Agentic company. We build,
Yes.
we genuinely build like and deploy agents, right? But the Agentic workflows are exciting. And when you look at the Alexa Plus demo, it's like a proactive thing, like Billie Eilish concert, coming up. Do you want me to let you know when tickets are available? Yeah. Like all of these things have made sense, and yet they've not led to that proliferation of usage for consumer voice assistants, right? And I've thought about this my whole life. It was part of our company decision making. And like, are we doing consumer? Are we doing enterprise? Right.
Right.
And the reason it's hard to do consumer is that level where the thing is like a super powered EA for your life. It's like, oh, conflicts. Do you want me to call an Uber for your kids because you're not going to be there in time to pick them up? This and that. It's a complicated orchestration of things where you need to have really high trust. And if you don't, if you get the same thing as autonomous driving, like people will not use it. Um, I think the demo there had like, reasoning steps of like, turn on the light, like by the sofa. It figures out that it's whatever, your living room light. I mean, over Christmas, I installed some smart lights, like kind of like LEDs in the backyard. And every day I gleefully go and say, hey Google, can you turn the garden lights on, right? Off later. And it gets the wrong half the time. I'm like,
Starts a blender.
a nice demo. The real issue there is just like, will people use it? Will
Right.
trust? Like, it's great that they're doing it. They should do a lot more, right? This is exciting.
Well, that's iteration 1.0 of just like those personal assistants from back in the day. And you know this from your early days over at Apple with Siri. And you like to tell the anecdote about how people, when they find that out about you, would say, "Oh, Siri sucks." And it's because it's sort of the next iteration of going in excited about the potential, about the hype, and then realizing that, it's still a fairly like new, complex technology going on behind the works, and it's going to be wrong a lot. Now, the only thing that we have is a precedent of low expectations when it comes to those personal assistants being able to fulfill. That, to me, doesn't set up that trust requirement to succeed because we're already going in flimsy at best of the capabilities of these sort of devices.
Yeah. Yeah. No, look, I think that the trust is not there yet. I think like as a society, will we do more with these things? I don't know, man. I think that like a lot of the people still using like GPT and stuff are like people like us who are
Right.
like hyper excited, deep in it. The general population, I think there's still a lot more people who need to start using this very heavily, right? The trust and, the whole kind of like accepting that it can do it and then coming to use it. It might be generational. It might just come naturally to Gen Alpha. We'll see.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I guess we'll see is the big modus operandi when it comes to most of these consumer developments, especially taking this huge step and saying, look, you may have been wary about Alexa and in the case of Amazon in the past, but we're taking this to a whole new level and we'll see if they can fulfill.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, look, I think it's just like which tasks do you want to do and how are you going to do it?
Right.
Will you give them another shot? Like, it's good. They need to keep trying. Eventually, we'll get there. It might be something that just happens gradually rather than overnight. We definitely have tools that are, a century ahead of where we were like a decade ago. So it makes sense to take another.
It's going to be a long time before I trust with anything other than timers and reminders, but we'll see. I'm open minded. All right, last piece. Very recent announcement. The U.S. Patent Office has taken an official stance on the copyrightableness and trademarkableness of AI generated output, and it is mostly that you can't patent this stuff. You can't protect the output. Essentially, the only part of AI generated work that can be protected, quote, requires meaningful human authorship and creativity, not just AI generation. So to me, that reads prompts, source material, etc., all that possible to copyright. In many cases, it is, but the generated content that comes as a result, not copyrightable. And, I got to be honest, this seems sensible. What are your thoughts?
I think so too. Although, it's in a world where like you might get different outputs. If you think of like novels and stuff like that, would you want it to be copyright if you worked for a long time? The thing assisted you. I don't know how this. I guess the source prompt is still copyright.
Right.
It's complicated. I would just like for the whole thing to be. I mean, they're all training on everyone's data, anyways. So I feel like there's almost like maybe this is my underlying anarchism, but um, I don't know. It's what do you think? Do you think this changes anything?
No, I mean, I think we're already moving towards a world where, the sense of training data was already kind of going into exclusive partnerships. So it was being addressed in court with some of those like high visibility use cases, or excuse me, non-authorized use cases for training materials of like authors or of media publications. So then what happened is eventually, checks were cut, and then things like Perplexity was making exclusive, or Perplexity was refusing to get exclusives, but OpenAI was like working directly with some publishers and media
Yeah.
outlets and saying, "Look, we want
I mean, the real issue
access."
is the first time that one of those models accidentally inhales like a website with robots.txt that says like "do not," and
Right,
then it's spitting out similar content elsewhere, and then other models train on it. It kind of like you know like by precedent, it's in there, and
right.
genie's out of the box. You can't really do much to roll it back.
But that's on the training side. For the output side, I mean, I think a lot of it makes sense. One,
Yeah.
it's kind of hard because you're building on, well, for the most part, except for open source LLMs, you're building on on a copyrighted model, right? And so if or a trademark model or some sort of protected model, if that's the
Not
case, and
model, you mean data?
the closed, well, yeah, the data itself, for the most part, is going to have some sort of protection. But then also just the processing model or whatnot, as far as a contributor towards the final output, it it's not it's not an individual. It's not a person who is entitled. It's a processing element. So much as a computer can't file a copyright on no, I don't know, anything that you create on it, or a typewriter can't. You need to have that personal element. The person is what's offered the protection. So if you're going to take a stance as the U.S. Patent Office does, and you're going to affect policy, it's going to be anything that shows significant human input. That's the piece that's copyrightable, and that to me makes sense.
Yeah, but I mean, there is a part which is kind of like IP address spoofing, right? Or where you're basically going on like you train on some data, then you output other data from that model, and then you train on some. Like for example, DeepSeek was, I think most people would agree that they heavily use like GPT-4 to
Yeah.
create its training data set. So then you're
Have
kind
you
of like,
seen the meme with someone fishing on the shore, and then they're putting the fish in the bucket, and the bucket says
yeah,
GPT? Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. So like at that point, like it's a money laundering operation. They've done it, then they apologize, they do it, they remove it. But at that point, that model has created so much data that is no longer copyrightable.
Right.
I feel like it's almost like a weakness too. And that genie's out of the box already, right?
Sure.
Like all of the data that, you know, places like New York Times and others are trying to protect, they're not going to be able to because, it's already been inhaled by all these models. It's getting outputted again, other open source models. Now, how you choose to use them or not, like you can't really roll it all back. It's
And the
already generated.
monetization comes in the exclusive partnerships, even though it's already out there. At least you can market the fact that this is the only sanctioned utilization of that data. And
Potentially. I don't know if they're going to see a lot of monetization.
nah, probably not. I think that time is come and gone. Like you said, it's already out there in the
Yeah.
ether, right?
Yeah.
Very cool. All right. Well, that's all I had with regards to some of the headlines. It was great to chat with you, Nicola.
As always.
All right. Enjoy the West Coast. And for the rest of you, we'll see you next week.